Hello, hello, and hello. Hello, everyone out there. My name is Jacqui Jones. I am CEO of 1 Degree Marketing and founder of Elevation Academy. And I am so excited to be live with you today. If you are here and present, I'm going to be trying my best to click around to keep up with what's going on. If you're here in real time, comment. Let me make sure that's working where I can see you in the different places where you are. Some of you are on LinkedIn, some of you may be on YouTube. And if you are watching this later, hi and welcome. I'm so glad that you're spending time replaying this. So just going to jump right into this. I'm excited that you joined me. And if you are wondering if you're in the right place, as a reminder, this is where you are. Hire or outsource what leaders get wrong about marketing support. You are in the right place. All right. So let's jump right into it. I like people say in the South, if you're not in the South, I get it. But like people say in the South, I won't be before you long. OK, I want to jump right into this because this is something that's very important to me. And I'm excited to just share my thoughts with you. And you can also say where you are, right? If you want to share where your location is. Hi, I see some people popping up here. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here and for being present. Okay, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I love it. Love to see all my people across Alabama. Always glad to see you all representing. Love that. So let's get this party started, y'all. Again, I'm not going to keep you very long. So thank you so much for being here if you're live. All right, so here is what we are doing today, right? We are talking about one of the most expensive decisions that leaders make, and most of them make it wrong, unfortunately, right? So at some point, every growing organization hits pretty much the same wall. We all at some point need more marketing support. And the instinct is to immediately ask the question, do we hire someone or do we outsource it, right? That's usually the first question, but that's actually the wrong first question. That's not where we should start. Most marketing problems aren't actually marketing problems. They're structural problems. And if you don't solve that structural problem first, it doesn't really matter who you bring in externally, how big a firm is or whatever, it probably won't work. So my goal today is that you know what signs tell you it's time to get more support in the first place, what marketing actually requires from a structural standpoint, and how to think through that hire versus outsource decision clearly. And maybe most importantly, what you might need to have in place before you activate either one of those options. All right. I'm going to check y'all's comments again here. I see people moving around. So glad to see you all. Tupelo, Mississippi in the house. Love it. Love to see you all here. So thank you again for being here. So let's jump right in, right? And we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So you can drop comments in this at any time. As you can see, I'm very laid back. I'm just in my office today. So as we go, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the comments. And also, I do have a one-page checklist that I'm happy to share with you. 5 things your organization needs to before you hire, outsource your marketing. So you can either drop your email in the comments. If you're uncomfortable with that, just shoot me a DM on LinkedIn and I'll get that to you hereafter. And everything on that checklist I'll be talking about. But if you want a reminder later and something to guide you, you can hit me up and I will get that to you. All right. So let's jump right into it. Now, this is not a webinar, which if you have ever watched me teach before, you know I am all about a webinar and all about some slides. But I do recognize, especially as the mother of a child with autism, that sometimes graphics and visuals can be very helpful. So I do have a few things that I'll share with you graphically so that you don't get super lost if you need that, okay? So let's start with the signs, right? And first of all, I want to be very clear that sometimes leaders know something is off with their marketing, but they can't really name it. I see you, Charlotte, North Carolina, in the building. Now, the most obvious sign is that you are the marketing department, right? You're the marketing department. You're writing the captions. You're approving the emails. You're the one who is noticing when nothing has been posted in the last 2 weeks. And if marketing only moves when you touch it, that's not a marketing strategy, that's a dependency. And we want to be very careful about that, but it's one of the most common signs. The second is your content and your communication are inconsistent. And I don't mean just in frequency, like how often you show up, but also in message. Like your website says one thing, your proposals say something else, your social media is a different brand entirely. And that inconsistency is costing you trust. And we know that trust is what closes business, right? So we want to be careful about that, but it is a great sign to let us know, hey, we might need a little bit more support. Third, you're spending money on marketing without being able to tell if it's really working. So maybe you boosted some posts, maybe you've hired a freelancer, maybe you ran some ads. And when someone asks what was the return on that, you don't really have a clear answer. And a lot of times we think that's a budget problem, but that's not a budget problem. That's a strategy problem. And another big sign that it's time for a little bit more marketing support. Fourth, if you've grown recently, which I know you have because you're great and amazing, you're doing great work out there in the world. If you've grown, but your marketing has not grown, what you were doing at $500,000 may not necessarily work at 1.5 million. And your audience is different. Your offers are maybe more complex. The stakes are higher, but the marketing infrastructure is the same as it was back some revenue ago, right? Or some growth ago. Maybe it's and let me say this too. And I say this all the time. Sometimes your definition of success may not be in dollars. And that may sound strange to some of us as business owners, right? That may be weird as a leader, but not all success is defined by how much money you bring in. It very well could be that your definition of success is in how many bodies are in the building, right? If you do events, it may be attendance. If you are looking at it from a digital standpoint, it may be engagement and things of that nature, but your definition of success is one of those things that you define in your marketing strategy. So when you hear me talking about that fourth sign and I'm saying, hey, that marketing may not be working, we're talking about institutional growth here, right? We're talking about your organization has grown and you are actually believing that the same thing that worked when you started this growth is going to continue to work as you are where you are now. And that's not necessarily true. And it's a big sign if you have not evolved that it's time for a little bit more support. Now, the last thing is that you can feel that ceiling, right? You know there's more revenue available. You know that there's more visibility possible and more within your grasp, but you don't really know how your current marketing situation is going to get you there. Like you don't know what's standing in between you and that thing. And if any of those kind of signs hit you today, you are in the right place, okay? I promise I have some things that hopefully will give you some clarity and somewhere to get started, okay? So let's keep going. Now, before we talk about hiring or outsourcing, I need to give you a bit of framework because most of the mistakes that I see that leaders make with marketing support come from not really understanding a particular thing. And I say this all the time, especially my team is used to hearing me say this. My 1 Degree marketing team, they hear me say this kind of thing all the time. Maybe it's when I'm venting, maybe it's not. That's our business. But I say something similar all the time under some circumstances. Marketing does not operate on one level. It really kind of operates on 3. And if you don't know which tier you're working in or which tier is broken, bringing in more people will not fix anything for you. It's just going to cost you more money to stay stuck. So I'll give you these 3 tiers, okay, if you're a visual person. So let's talk about tier 1 first. Brand and strategic foundation. This is the top of the house. I know it's on the bottom of the pyramid. Just stick with me, okay? But it is the beginning. Let me not say top of the house. It's the beginning, okay? This is where you define, and let me repeat that. This is where you define who you are, what you stand for, who you're even talking to, what every piece of marketing has to deliver. Brand positioning, things like messaging pillars, voice and tone, your audience segmentation, annual marketing strategies, campaign planning, all of that stuff is happening in tier 1. Approval, governance structure, that's tier 1 activity. Tier 1 is not creative work. It's not execution. It is decision-making infrastructure. And tier 1 has got to be owned by leadership, not delegated to a vendor, not handed off to a coordinator. It has to be owned, directed, and decided. Please hear me. And I'm going to pause there for somebody to let that just seep into their being right now. Okay. Tier 1 has got to be owned. Now, let's move on. In tier 2, with your channel and campaign strategy, this is that middle layer, right? This is where tier 1 decisions get translated into action, which is things like, which channels are we going to use? Why are we using them? What does the campaign calendar actually look like? And how does our social, email, our PR, our events, all the paid media, all the things that we're doing, how are they all going to work together? So tier 2 connects the vision to the execution. All right. It's the bridge in between. Now, so remember, we have our tier 1, which is that owned by leadership, defining foundational tier. Then we have our tier 2, which is like a bridge, but it's translating the vision and all the things that we've defined for ourselves and our organization and moving it toward execution. Tier 3 is that execution and production space. This is where the work gets made, right? This is graphics, it's photography, video, social posts, ads, prints, all those things. Tier 3 is where most organizations start because it is the most visible layer. You can see it, you can point to it, you can critique it all day long. But here's what I need you to understand. Tier 3 cannot lead itself. Execution without strategy is just activity. Like, it's just you doing something. And that's going to hurt somebody's feelings. But I'm okay with it. I've embraced the fact that it might hurt someone's feelings. Operating in that third tier without something guiding it is just activity. And activity without direction is really expensive noise. That's a fact, right? So now let me tell you what this looks like when it breaks down, because I have seen it, I have lived it, and honestly, some version of it may be happening in your organization as I am live on LinkedIn/YouTube, right? So when tier 1 is not built, the space doesn't stay empty, right? It exists, it doesn't stay empty, but someone steps into that tier 1 space, usually without really meaning to. Maybe it's your communications person. Maybe it could be some very vocal team member. It could even be that young person on your team that everyone thinks is capable because of their age, right? That happens a lot in organizations. And maybe I'm going to say this with all the love and care that I possibly, all the Southern love and care and bless your heart that I can muster up. I'm going to say this with love. It could be you. It could be you that's making brand decisions about what you personally like rather than what your brand strategy requires. And I want you to sit with that. If it is you, you do not have to raise your hands in the comments today, right? And if you want to confess, my DMs on LinkedIn are always open. This is a safe space, all right? You can say that to me. You 100% can come to me and confess that if you want to. I'm happy to hear you say that. But the people that step into that space aren't doing it to be bad. They're not malicious. Like, you're not a bad person for filling that hole, because it does have to be filled. They're doing it because the infrastructure does not exist and nothing is telling them otherwise. There is no positioning document. There is no defined messaging framework. There's no governance structure. There's no criteria. So decisions get made on preference instead of strategy. A very common, occurrence, right? And let me tell you how it shows up in a physical sense. Feedback becomes subjective. Revision cycles start to take forever. It multiplies. And your marketing partners, whether they're internal or external, can't fully do their job because there is no foundation to build on. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. And I'll be transparent, right? Even at 1 degree, we've had to be very intentional about this. When you're close to the work, it's easy to slide into execution mode and neglect that strategic layer. It's a discipline, right? And this is what I always remind people. Marketing is a science. It's a discipline. And it requires a leader who is willing to own that top tier, not just assign it, not just hand it off, not just hope it works out. Someone has got to own that foundational tier. And just as a reminder, in case, you're just popping on or you want to see those tiers, someone has got to own that bottom foundational piece before we get all the way to execution, right? Somebody's got to do it. Now, I will say this. if you want to honestly ask yourself right now, who owns this tier one in your organization? Pause, and you may want to ask someone else, but for the sake of our little time here together, who owns that? Is it you? Is it even decided? Did you even know that that existed, right? Those are questions that we have to face. Now, and again, not who touches it, not who has opinions about it, because everybody has an opinion about it for sure, but who owns it? Who has the authority? Who has the expertise and the accountability to make those foundational decisions? Now, if you hesitate to answer that, then that is your answer, right? If you're hesitating to answer that and you're unsure, then your answer is really already there. Okay. All right, let's move on. Now, we can actually talk about the hire versus outsource question because now you have a bit of context, right? We can make a little bit more sense of the answer. And if the first thing, the first thing I want to say is this: it's not always an either or decision about outsourcing or hiring. Most organizations at some point, they need both. The real question is, what does each option actually give you? What does it cost you? And what does it require of you as the leader? You right there. Hey, you right there. What does it require of you as the leader? Now, when you bring on an internal person, let's start there. When you bring on an internal hire, you get someone who is inside the building, right? They know your culture, which is extremely important. They are in the room. They can respond in real time. They're building institutional knowledge, and they grow with your organization over time. And for the right role at the right tool, at the right tier of this, that continuity is genuinely valuable. It's extremely valuable to the success of marketing your organization. But here's what leaders underestimate: an internal hire requires the most from you up front. You have to know what tier you are hiring for. You have to be able to onboard them into a strategy that already exists. Now, if you are hiring for that foundational tier, that's one thing. But everything else, that strategy has already got to be in place. And you have to be able to evaluate their work, which means you need to have a definition of what right is and what good looks like. And you have to manage them, not just employ them. You actually have to direct them based on those things that have been decided. And a marketing hire without a marketing literate leader above them will either underperform or they are going to leave. I'm going to say that again, all right? Because I think it's very important to hear clearly. A marketing hire without a marketing literate leader above them will either underperform or they will leave. The hire is not the problem. The infrastructure or the lack thereof, or the leadership above that hire is not there. So when you bring on an internal hire, depending on which tier you're hiring for, if that does not exist, you are setting yourself up. And that is just me being the most honest I can be with you today. All right. So that's the internal piece of it. Now, when you bring on outsource support, you get a little bit different things here, right? You get a specialized expertise, usually faster than a hire, like they're ready to go. And without the overhead cost of a full-time salary and benefits, which we all love to save some money, right? But a good external partner brings perspective your internal team does not have. They can scale up or down kind of based on your needs and where you are. And they often can move faster because they're not navigating your internal politics. Right? And that is worth the price of admission right there, not to have to do all the tiptoeing around, well, what about and who did and whatever. When they're outsourced and they're outside of that, then they can relax and just do their job. A blessing, okay? But let me say this, outsource support has a ceiling and most leaders hit it without understanding why. External partners can only be as effective as the direction that they're given. I should probably say that again as well. And for any service providers who go back and watch this, I feel like you all are going to come to my direct messages and you're going to be like, girl, thank you. Thank you so much for saying the things. Again, external partners can only be as effective as the direction that they are given. If you cannot articulate your brand position, If you cannot articulate your messaging, your goals, your definition of success, you will spend a lot of money getting work that does not feel right, like going through endless revisions. And ultimately, most people will blame the vendor for a problem that started before they were even brought on. And honestly, as a vendor, that's not really fair. I'll just say it, it's not fair. But sometimes, again, I don't think it's malicious that people do this, but I think when you don't realize that that's the case, that's what happens. And the agency is not lost. The strategy is, right? So here's how that tier framework does its real work on this decision, right? So with your tier 1 support, and again, I'm going to put this up here just because, again, if you're like me, you sometimes need to see these things in person or on the screen. With your tier 1 support, almost always needs an internal owner or a senior external partner at like a fractional CMO level. This is not a coordinator role. This is leadership, okay? This is not something that you hand to someone who does not have expertise, authority, and leadership, all right? On the tier 2 support side of this, it can go either direction. Now, and let me back up and say this again. So here we are, and I want to make sure I don't lose anyone. We're applying these tiers to the internal versus external, the outsourcing versus the hire. Tier 1, almost always, almost 100%, like 99%, it's like hand sanitizer, where it's like 99.9%. Usually tier 1 support is internal. Usually that is an internal hire because they're usually in leadership in that organization. It could also be a senior external partner. So if you do a fractional CMO, that means you're allowing someone to come in and spend time at the table with you. Still in leadership, right? That's not your social media marketer. That's not who that is on tier 1, okay? It's not a coordinator role. It's not a project manager even. They may have project management skills, and we love that, but it may not be a project manager. Now, tier 2 support can go really either way. Internal marketing manager plus an external strategist is kind of a hybrid that works well when tier 1 is solid. So when tier 1 is together, when you have that person who is not just, and I say this also all the time, your marketing goals and the things that you're trying to accomplish in your marketing are a direct result of what is happening in your business or organization. Tier 1 is where that understanding is solid. So when that's in place and it's together and it's solid, you can go to your tier 2 side and begin to translate that with a hybrid partnership, external and internal. Or you can go all the way external, right? You can outsource that entirely if tier 1 is solid, if it is solid, right? Now in our tier 3 support, often this is the best place for people to outsource. So your graphic design, your content production, photography, you don't need all of that in-house necessarily. You need it to be excellent and consistent, and but you need it to be directed by a clear strategy, right? And here's the thing, more bodies at the wrong tier is not a solution. Having more people on your team and they're not operating at the right tier, or another thing, this feels like I feel like I'm stepping on a lot of toes right now, right? But you don't necessarily need more people on your team. You have to make sure that you're putting them in the right place and that they have the skill set and the capacity to execute at the tier that you are hiring for internally or outsourcing to. But more bodies at the wrong tier is not a solution. It's a more expensive version of the same problem, right? It's not helping you get to the place that you need to get to. Okay. So is everybody with me? I just want to make sure that, I'm not just, while there's a level of being on live that is you talking to yourself, I just want to make sure that everybody's with me. Are y'all out there? Let me check the comments real quick. That everybody with me? Y'all good? We doing well? And I know there's a slight delay, so I'll give you a second to respond to that. All right. Yes, I see you out there. Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Let us keep it going because, like I said, I'm not going to keep you that full hour that they make me say. Now, so we've talked here a bit about the signs, and we've talked about the 3 tiers, right? And we've talked about what hire and outsource actually mean and require. And now I kind of want to bring that home and just begin to land this plane, and maybe we can have conversation if you have questions. Because the question I do get most often after leaders have heard all of this is, okay, so where do I start? Valid question. All right. And the answer is always the same. You start with your foundation. Now, this is not necessarily that you start with a job posting, an agency search, not with a content calendar or a campaign plan, but with your foundation. That is where we must begin. So before you hire or outsource your marketing, I'm going to tell you 5 things your organization needs to have defined. All right. So let us get yet another little thing here. And I'm trying to check you all's comments. Great. All right. So first things first. A clear brand position, all right? Not just a tagline, not a mission statement, an actual positioning statement that tells you and everyone who works on your marketing, internal or external, who you are, who you serve, what makes you different, why it even matters. This is the document that ends the "I don't think this feels like us" conversations. That is the thing that does that, because now there's a standard. And that is the first thing that you need, whether you're going to hire or outsource. That foundational piece is extremely important. The second thing that you want to have is define messaging pillars. What are the 2, 3, 4 core messages that your brand always comes back to? What do you always say? What do you never say? Your messaging pillars create consistency across every single channel, every campaign, every piece of content, regardless of who's producing it. So whether it is you, whether someone on the team has to touch it, whether it's internal, external, it should not matter, because you have those pillars in place. I hope that makes sense. I hope that lands. The third thing is you want to have a documented brand voice. How does your brand sound? Not just professionally, very specifically. Voice documentation is what prevents your internal team from writing one way, your agency from writing another way, and your CEO from writing a whole other way, right? Because, don't raise your hand, but if you have an unhinged CEO, they just do what they want to do. But if everyone has that same defined messaging pillar and a documented brand voice, and you can make sure that it creates a standard that you're able to scale. All right. The fourth thing that I want you to have is a definition of success, your definition of success. Before you bring anyone in, hired, outsourced, internal, external, you need to know what you're measuring. Specifically, what does a successful 6 months look like? And if you can't define success before they start, you cannot evaluate their performance after. That's not how that works. You can't reverse engineer expectation. I feel like I need to write that down. Somebody write that down for me. You cannot reverse engineer expectation. You've got to set that standard at the beginning for yourself, but also for whoever you are working with, okay? And, you end up frustrating yourself, them. You have a very expensive relationship that nobody can make sense of when you don't have that definition of success. At that point, everybody's getting set up for failure, right? So really, really important that we do that. Now, the last thing is we want to have a leader who can direct it all. This is the one nobody talks about, and it might honestly be the most important. Marketing support at any tier requires a leader above it who understands enough to direct it, not execute it, actually direct it. You don't have to be a marketer, but you do have to be marketing literate. Okay? I want to say that. You don't have to be a marketer. And usually when I'm teaching, especially small businesses, I do a lot of SBDC teaching, which shout out to Small Business Development Center, especially at the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. I do a lot of teaching with MasterCard Digital Doors. I do a lot of teaching with Our Village United, shout out to them as well. I try to remind, and I always say, hey, because you're a marketer, congratulations. And as a small business owner, we find ourselves being the CEO and the janitor. I get it. You are the HR person, you're the accountant, you're the everything, you're the birthday, you're everything, okay? And so it's important that you have all of these skill sets. But I think that what happens even outside of small business ownership is that in leadership in general, people feel like, one, they even have to hire a marketer, or they take the mindset like, well, I don't do marketing, just do whatever you want to do because I don't know. You don't have to be a marketer, but you absolutely have to be marketing literate. That's extremely important that you remember. You've got to know enough to be able to direct the ship. This is the work that has to happen first, before the hire, before the agency, right? Before they get started, before the campaign starts. This is tier one, and it's exactly the work most organizations skip because it's not as visible as posting content or running content or running ads. But it is the difference between marketing that works and is successful and marketing that just costs you money. That is the defining difference. All right. Now, I've run my mouth enough, right? I can see your comments. I appreciate your energy coming back to me, but I do want to just kind of tell you a little bit about Elevation Academy. Now, again, I'm CEO of 1 Degree Marketing. I founded Elevation Academy, and I'll tell you, this is exactly what we built. Our next upcoming thing it's happening on May 19th. And I'm running, a working session specifically designed to help leaders build this type of foundation, not talk about it, actually build it. Leaving with brand positioning, statement messaging, state positioning statement, messaging pillars, a defined brand voice, and a completed brand guide workbook. 3.5 hours, and we are up out of there. Okay. That is what I think is extremely important. And so I'm going to share that information with you, because if you're hearing this and you're saying, hey, okay, I am that leader and I'm supposed to be tier one, but I have not done this. This is going to be very important for you to spend some actual time doing, not just learning about, but actually doing. So, okay, just want to say that out loud. But I do want to make sure that I hear from you, hear any questions that you might have. And I want to leave enough time for us to have those discussions. So any questions for me at this time? Let me pause for the calls here, because everybody that knows me knows I can just go on and go on and go on. And I really want to know, ultimately, does this make sense? Like, I think this way, and I see this as a vendor and as, the leader of 1 Degree Marketing and as an outsourced partner for a lot of people. But I want to make sure that in leadership, it makes sense. And I love some of what you all are saying. So let's see, that I often feel like success definition is purposefully hidden, veiled. Right. It's like, you don't always see it. Somebody wrote it down for me. Thank you so much. You cannot reverse engineer expectations. I think that's a life lesson, honestly. That might apply outside of work. We're so grateful for that. And then also wrote it. Thank you for the people who wrote that down for me. I appreciate it so much. All right. If you don't have any questions for me, again, I'm not going to try to keep you forever on this live, but I am so glad that you decided to join me. Again, if you are interested in finding out more about the Elevation Academy offering that's coming up, it's called The Marketing Machine. It's on May 19th. And I would love to help you or the leader in your organization. If that's not you and you want to, gently push and say, hey, guy, girl, homie, friend, whatever they are to you in your life. I saw this great live with Jacqui Jones. I don't know if you know her, but she's offering 3.5 hour work session to help you work through this and help us define this better. I think we need this to steer our ship. Would love to have them. So all you got to do is visit joinelevationacademy.com. And again, I will remind you, if you are on this live, and I don't think I said this out loud, it was on the screen. If you are on this live, you can use code LIVE100 to get $100 off of that working session. And I would love to have you there. So if there are no other comments, questions, concern. Oh, I got one here. Here we go. Let's see what we got here. Any advice for someone who works in marketing and needs help, potentially to outsource, but they have a director who doesn't understand what we do and need to explain? This is a very common thing. And this is where I said, you don't have to be a marketer, but you do have to be marketing literate, right? You do have to have leadership that understands. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are currently and let's be clear, because I don't want to pin this on leaders as though they're wrong for not knowing. Marketing itself, especially in the digital landscape, has changed so much. I'm not going to tell you when I graduated from college, but when I got my marketing degree, it looked nothing like it looks now. And so that understanding for leadership is very difficult. And so when you're talking to your director or you're talking to someone who is in the decision-making space and they don't understand, it becomes a version of what I'm doing now. It becomes a version of educating them to say, hey, we're doing this thing. And maybe after you do something they've asked you to do, you walk them through that entire process. And you say, here's what could have been helpful for us, or what we realized along the way was missing. And while we might not have done this tier 1, tier 2 stuff this time, it could really save us time, money, and otherwise. And this is where you really have to put a marketer hat on. I had this conversation recently with someone that you have to, and I say this to everyone, but I had a specific conversation I'm thinking about. You have to talk about your audience's problem in their own language. You have to give them the solution in their own language. So if your leadership or director does not understand even what you're doing, let alone why you need more support, and all they hear is you want to spend more money on something that they don't understand, then you got to translate that into their language. What do they care about? Is it the cost of it? Is it convoluted in some way? How does it impact them? And then you explain it in their own words. You lead with the things that are always on their mind. I hope that makes sense, right? So you want to tell them what you need, but you need to say it in their language. It's the same thing that we do in marketing in general. We describe our audience's problem the way that they describe it. And then when we sell them a solution, we sell it to them in their own language so that they understand it. Does that help? I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. Just make sure you're taking time to see it from their perspective. That's a great question, by the way. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Emotional breakdowns is what I always say. If not, and I'm giving it a minute for the delay, but if not, I do want to thank you all for spending these few minutes with me live on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And again, if you are watching this later, I want to thank you so much for watching this replay. Really, really appreciate you all doing this. I had a really great time with you. And again, if you're interested in the May 19th Elevation Academy offering, I encourage you to go and use that code LIVE100 and get the $100 off. All right, that's it. That's all. I have enjoyed you. If you're looking for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me a direct message if you want that checklist. And I will see you all the next time I decide to do this. Have a great day.